Hey everyone, we're Journey to the West. I'm V, and I'm here with Jay,
Hey, I'm Jay.
and I'm here with Sun,
Hi everyone, I'm Sen.
and I'm here with Wen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wen.
And today's podcast topic will be on dun 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 microaggressions. So, to start off with it, Jay, can you give us a brief explanation of what microaggressions are?
So basically, simplified version, microaggressions are these small, everyday slights that people who are members of marginalized groups or minorities experience. They can be verbal, so things people say to us, physical, so the way people interact with us physically or the situational environment, like things that are happening around us, how we're treated in comparison to other people. They can be intentional or unintentional. So, like, people can be intentionally trying to harm us or not realize what they're doing. And they usually imply something negative.
With microaggressions, I think a lot of us have had personal experiences with them. Some people may say words don't matter. Sometimes in these cases they do because they remind those who are marginalized how they are viewed within the dominant society. So I will give you an example. I was just actually recently going to the post office. I was delivering a package to my friend, and this mailman who was non-Asian was trying to start a conversation with me. I was like, okay, well, I need to give my package to my friend. And then he sees my last name, and he's like, you're Vietnamese? And I was like, yeah, what about it? He's like, you don't look Vietnamese. And I'm like, well, how so? And he's like, well, all the Viet Cong I see in the movies are darker skinned. You are lighter skinned.
Yikes.
Awkward! Awkward! And
On like multiple levels.
I could only respond by saying, in Europe back in the day, they also had this notion that those who with lighter skin were more noble and privileged than those who were darker skinned in European societies. Because, like, it's not just an Asian thing, it's also like a European thing, and European societies, light skin was valued and seen as higher class. And he just tried to retort it by saying, well, now they realize that tan is in and means well traveled, so yeah, it's kind of annoying. So yeah, any experiences you guys have?
Actually, that reminds me a bit of something that happened to my boyfriend because even though he's East Asian, he tans a lot in the summer. And somebody actually told him to go back to Vietnam once.
That is so rude.
What the fuck?
Yeah. It's like multiple levels of what the fuck.
Any stories you got, Sen?
I got one in a very similar vein. I was in a high school modern history class, and I was like one of two Asians in that class, the other one being my Chinese friend. So we were sitting in class in the library, and we had some teacher aide come in, and she was supposed to teach us how to look for sources and do research. Our topic for that semester was to choose a famous person in history, and that particular teacher aide had a daughter that did the same thing, and she chose like Ho Chi Minh, and she was not only talking about what her daughter did, but gushing over the man himself, which I found so odd. But as she was doing this, she was looking directly at me and going, Ho Chi Minh will forever be in our hearts. And yeah, she was literally talking about herself and her daughter, because I don't know how she found this lovable affinity with him, but she did. And she was staring directly at me in this whole little monologue of hers, and I was like looking around the class trying to find help, because I was like, does anyone else see what I'm seeing? Because this is insane. Okay, I'm looking desperately around the class. No one's looking. Everyone's just very nonchalant, but like mostly bored about this. But I was just like, what the fuck is going on? And I look at next to my friend. I'm looking at her. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then I look at my like Sudanese friend. I'm looking at her. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Because like those two were the only ones who I felt like were a bit aware of the racism or like the very Eurocentric views that the history class happened to have. But anyway, I was just like, oh my god, this is so weird. I don't know if she was aware, but a lot of the students at the school were Southern Vietnamese, like they identify as Southern Vietnamese. So if any adult heard us say this, they would go off on our ass, probably. Another one quickly is I remember I was like serving a customer in food service, and this older lady approached me and asked me what ethnicity I was. And I responded because, like, at this point, when you're in customer service, it's just better just to like get it over with and not be so difficult, I guess you would say. Anyway, she talked about how her grandchildren were Harper, but they were like Taiwanese and Korean. So she was like gushing about their Asianness in a very broadly oriental way, and I was just so weirded out by it. I'm not even Korean or Taiwanese. I don't know what the fuck you're on about, but I just like entertain her and send her off on her way.
I feel you on the weird customer service experiences, because like they feel like they can say things to you and you can't really respond back in a way that's too negative, because you're supposed to be polite. And so people have straight up come up to me and asked me to translate Chinese characters, and I'm not even Chinese. And I've had people ask me at work how they can get a traditional Asian woman, whatever the fuck that means. And then also the classic asking where you're really from, which I like to respond with by just like pretending I don't know what they really mean, and then just keep answering in ways that are frustrating to them until they give up.
Well, I know Wen's been in customer service, right?
Oh gosh.
You got any stories?
But I definitely do remember when working at the family restaurant. I remember I had a customer that they make their order. So of course I take their orders, and I remember that customer said that my English was very good, which I was that was pretty awkward because I just said that, well, I was born here, so yeah, but figured, yeah, I think my English, of course, would not be terrible at all. Come on. And it was more funny. It's like, and the funny thing was like the customer wasn't like, sometimes you can tell, especially with like sometimes with people's like their tone of voice or the way they're saying it to you. And it was just one of those things where, wow, it's just that it's like, is it going to be like those stereotypes again, right? It's just that people just never seem to think about it. That, come on, that's because I'm Asian. You wouldn't think that I was actually also born, in the U.S. also. They still think I'm like fresh off the boat. So just always assume that. And that has like just some of the other random ones as well. I remember when I was younger, in school, I was usually either the only Asian or just some of the few, while those other very few other Asians were pretty much in their own clique, in the class. And it's like I remember other people would always make remarks saying that, oh, since I'm so ugly, and assume that, and that they would always assume that, oh, I must be desperate and I would go for anyone. It's like, wow, thanks for thinking I might be some type of hoe bag, because really, people, just, I don't know, I just never forgot that. It was just, that really just ticked me off.
Wait, how old were you? That's like so fucked up.
Oh, that was in middle school.
What the fuck?
I would think I was only, maybe 12 or 13?
Jesus.
At the time, when people were just saying those kind of things. Of course, I'm pretty sure that didn't stop. Even in high school, people would still say that too. And also, speaking of school, still continuing on with that, do any of you guys remember driver's ed?
Oh my god. Memories. Yep.
When I had to applying or enrolling in driver's ed, was it in high school? It's usually only a certain amount of students can be enrolled at a certain time. And I remember being in a group with a girl that I think she was in the same math class as I was. I don't know. She was just trying to be funny. Yeah, trying to be funny at my expense. Yeah, she was going on about how being in the car with someone who, and I'm quoting this, who barely reaches the pedal. Like, wow, thanks for saying that. You think that I'm so short that I can't reach the car pedal? Really? I'm pretty sure I can reach it just fine. Also, when I was, at the beginning, those orientation, I guess you would have when you enroll in it, we were getting to, had to go use the school's car. Also, it was like at those times, the teacher, I don't know why, the teacher basically said that, basically mentioning that they have these, those car seats, those cushions that I could use when it's my turn to drive. It's like, wow, sir, I'm not that short that I would even need to have any type of extra little seat thing for me. So I can see fine. I feel like I don't practice driving on my own time with my dad. And I don't think we ever used any type of seat cushion or anything. I didn't have any problems be able to see or reach the car pedals.
That is so offensive.
And sometimes it's hard to tell if something's a microaggression because they're so subtle. But in a case like that, that's definitely, they're making fun of your height or assuming that you're really short because you're Asian, even though you have no problem reaching the pedals. And that actually reminds me of how a lot of the time my boyfriend will get comments from people calling him short, even though he's pretty tall. He's actually 5'11". And a lot of the people who are telling him that he's short are actually shorter than he is. Like, he has to look down at them to meet their eye level. But they've internalized this idea that Asians are supposed to
They're
be short.
just looking up at him going, "You're short."
Yeah, it's like how fucking ridiculous do you look looking up at somebody and telling them that they're short? It's like the facts don't matter because this racial assumption is what wins for them.
Here's why microaggressions, why they're not okay. They're not okay because they are reinforcing the idea that white is superior. They are not okay because they are keeping the marginalized. Another thing, even if they're subtle, I tend to stick up when it comes to microaggressions. Like I say, with the last male dude, I was like, in Europe, they also have this thing too. And then he tried to retort, but it's like, dude, I'm not gonna play your game. When it comes to no matter how subtle microaggressions are, I know it's not easy for everyone, but I think one of the ways we can fight them back is by playing their own game. I'll give you an example. Someone in my mom's office asked her if something was made in China or something, or this must be made in China, it's so cheap, blah 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 blah. It was like a tool or something. And she's like, no, I don't think it's made in China. Maybe it's made in England, Germany. I mean, those stuff break too. You don't play into their game when it comes to microaggressions. My mom has received plenty of them, by the way. And so once she finds them out, she's like, I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to play your game back at you. And some people actually respond in such shock when you're sticking up for yourself. You'd be really surprised. Have any of you ever called out microaggression or kind of retorted against it before? Anybody?
Yeah, there's always some tone deaf person who tries to minimize your experience. Oh, yeah, that's kind of like how when I was bullied at school for being a geek. But that's not the same as race. And because they don't understand race, really, they don't really understand. Try to make this false equivalence. It's the same as what they went through. But no, you can't relate because you're still seen as normal if you are a white person in a Western country.
I just don't really address microaggressions with a lot of white people. I think in the past it's usually because I'm not in a position where I can, or I realize a little bit too late that it was a microaggression. Like I have to second guess myself. I would say microaggressions are very similar to you're a deer in the headlights. You're just kind of staring right at it and you're not really sure what you're witnessing is happening, or you're trying to process. So it's really hard for people to like immediately address it. And like actually I've found that other Asians sometimes gaslight me when I actually do bring it up to them because I'm more comfortable.
You know what? Let's bring this up. Okay. Honestly, when it comes to how like I've dealt with other Asians from personal experience, they've also like gaslighted me. And it's just like I think the bigger problem is that because it doesn't justify anything, but it's so fascinating and kind of irritating how many of us Asians, at least living in America, I know some of them do internalize that racism and actually enable it. Even they're like they would say, "Oh, I don't want to be associated with those Asians." They totally will be like, "But I'm not like the rest of the Asians," and all that kind of stuff. It's like, wow. But sorry, I went off the tangent. But when you have any experiences from like calling out microaggressions, or at least like your responses from your past experiences?
I either just didn't pay attention as much to it, or I just pretty much just didn't bother just pointing it out or say anything about it at the time. I just don't seem to have words to like I guess how to say against it. But I did remember, like, because you know how we talk about, so you remember, like, about stereotypes, right? The stereotypes that we're Asians, like, saying how these stereotypes are on, the so-called positive ones. And I remember someone that I do have respect for, but it's always good to have, at least you have those positive stereotypes. I mean, yes, whatever, negative, positive, it's still pretty messed up because, that's what they are, stereotypes. And I just felt bad. I just never had a much of a good response at that time.
In my Asian American class, I did read an article about how people, like one Asian American student was voicing his personal experiences with these microaggressions, and other people were like, "Oh, what's wrong with them? They're positive." And it's like, no, they're not. We're here to say it right now. No, they're not. Just because we're thought of as smarter and obedient doesn't mean that it's a good thing, you know? It gives white society an excuse to marginalize us further by saying, oh, because they're so quiet and obedient, we don't have to worry about them. We don't have to worry about their safety system. Like, they basically could use it as an excuse to neglect, like, poor Asian communities or those who are disadvantaged because it's, like, used as a way to silence their experiences.
And on the flip side, used to target us for violence and crime.
Yeah, because we're the ones who are the problems in society, but it's like, no, white society is the problem. But for those who haven't fallen for that model minority myth, thank you. Because unfortunately, I have seen too many who still fall for it to this day. And there is no justification for that. None at all. I want to begin to reaffirm that a lot of people are like, why is it a bad thing? Like, they expect us to educate them on these issues. So, Jay, can you reaffirm why it's not our job to educate people?
There are plenty of fucking resources out there at this point in time. And it's always the burden on us as marginalized people to explain everything to those who don't understand, who have not experienced these things. And like half the time when we do try to explain, they don't believe us. They're like requiring us to convince them why they should fucking care or why they should stop doing this, because whatever we say isn't enough because they can't relate. And it feels like a waste of time. Like it's emotional labor that we shouldn't be obligated to do.
Let me be real. We have to convince you, or if you try to gaslight and say, well, I can relate to it somewhat, it's a universal thing. No, 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 no. That shit won't fly. You benefit from that society if you give those excuses. If you have the privilege of not caring or giving a shit about this, it means you're a privileged person in society. Let's be real. Any last thoughts, Sen? Like why it's not our job to educate people?
When people say, oh, the perpetrators that do these microaggressions are just ignorant and they really mean well, and I just think that's an excuse because we live in a day and age where information is so readily available. So I don't really buy that, oh, we just need more education for people to not be racist because people do it anyway. Like, I've seen a lot of Twitter threads play out where someone does something racist and then somebody calls them out and then they just dismiss it because it's a lot easier to believe you're not racist than to actually address that you may be hurtful to people or saying just really bad things.
Rule of thumb. No matter how big or small a microaggression is, call it out. You'd be surprised how shocked people are when you stand up for yourself. I know not everyone can do it, but one day at a time, like think about it. If you're in a favorable position and you're tired of being putting up with the stuff, call it out. So I'm V. I am probably not gonna be back on social media, but you can see me at the JttW podcast account on Twitter time to time, and I'll still be writing for April. So yeah, there's that. And we have Jay.
Thanks for listening. And on Twitter, I am J_MARAAN.
And we have Sen.
Okay, thanks for listening, everyone. You can find me on Twitter as Sentient. And I also want to quickly thank, we got an Apple podcast review from East West Mess. Yes. So thanks for that. Really appreciate any reviews you guys leave.
Yes.
And we have one.
Thanks for listening.
All right. See you guys soon.